When the riders came for tribute, they did not ask twice. They wore lacquered bone masks and iron scales sewn into black leather. Their pennants were stitched with the crest of Lord Varkle, the wolf jaw split by a crown, and every village on the river plain knew what that meant: grain, iron, sons, and silence. The village of Ember Hollow had little grain that year. Frost had cut the barley young. The river had bitten 2 fields in spring. By harvest, even the dogs had ribs like fingers. So when Captain Dren of the tribute guard rode into the square and hammered a spear butt on the well stones, no one moved to greet him. He smiled like a man standing over dry tinder. "By order of Lord Varkle," he shouted, voice carrying to shutters and smoke holes, "tribute is due. 12 carts of grain, 3 bars of steel, 2 apprentices for service." A door opened. Old Ivan the miller came out with his hat in both hands. "Captain," he said, "we can pay part, not all." Dren tilted his head mock thoughtful. "Part," he laughed, and his riders laughed with him. "Did winter come to your lord's table too?" People drifted into the square, thin and still in worn cloaks. At the back stood Garin, Ember Hollow's blacksmith, broad as an ox, soot burned into his skin like permanent dusk. Beside him was his son, Cale, 16, all elbows and sparks, hands bandaged from the forge. Garin spoke once and everyone listened. "We have iron," he said. "No spare grain. Take steel, leave seed." Captain Dren's eyes found him and narrowed with pleasure. "Ah," he said, "the famous smith who thinks hammering iron makes him equal to law." Garin didn't flinch. "I think hungry children matter more than your books." The square froze. Dren dismounted slowly. He walked toward Garin, unfastening one glove finger by finger. "Do you know," he said softly, "what tribute really is?" Cale watched his father set one hand on the boy's shoulder the way he always did when the forge spat too hot. "Stay behind me," that hand said. "Tribute," Dren went on, "is memory. Every village must remember who owns tomorrow." He struck Garin across the mouth with the gloved hand. Garin staggered, spat blood, and stood straight. No one moved. Dren smiled wider. "Burn the granaries," he said. The riders scattered like thrown knives. "No," women screamed, running. Men rushed with buckets and wet blankets, but the guards were ready. Anyone who came near was kicked down or slashed with the flat of blades. A rider flung a torch through the bakery window. Another ripped down a thatch roof and dropped fire into rafters that had survived 3 generations. Cale broke from his father and ran toward the lower granary where his little sister, Myra, had been sorting sacks with their mother. "Cale!" Garin roared. He didn't stop. Smoke hit him first, thick and oily. The granary doors were shut from inside against sparks, and now they were bars. He slammed his shoulder into them once, twice, heard his mother coughing and Myra crying behind the wood. "Back!" someone shouted. Cale turned. Captain Dren stood 20 paces away, watching him like this was theater. Cale grabbed an iron hook from a cart and jammed it between door planks. He pulled until his shoulders screamed. The bar inside cracked. The door opened a hand's width. Then a rider struck him from behind. He hit dirt and saw sky and embers spinning. Boots stamped his wrist. The hook skittered away. He tried to crawl, and a gauntlet grabbed his hair and yanked him up. Dren's face filled his vision, calm and amused. "Watch," the captain said. Cale screamed until his throat tore as fire swallowed the door and the voices behind it disappeared under the roar. By dusk, Ember Hollow was ash and black bones of beams. By night, Garin and half the men were dead, cut down after trying to fight with hoes and smithing hammers. Others were dragged in chains as levy labor. The riders left before dawn with steel bars, 2 screaming apprentices, and laughter. Cale survived because old Ivan found him by the burnt well, curled under a cart wheel with blood in his ear and cinders in his hair. For 3 days he did not speak. On the 4th, he walked to the ruins of the forge. The anvil stood, cracked but upright like a tooth refusing to fall. Cale put his palms on it and whispered the names of everyone lost. Then he swore, not to kill Captain Dren, not yet. He swore to make tribute impossible. The mountains north of Ember Hollow were called the Stormback Teeth. In spring they were white knives. In summer, gray ribs under bruised cloud. Old songs said thunder was born there, trapped in hollow stone. Cale climbed into them with a hammer, a coil of wire, 3 bread loaves, and his father's tongs. He would have died in the first week if not for a woman named Tamsin Rook. She found him half-conscious in sleet, trying to chip metal from a cliff seam with numb hands. He woke in a cave with a hot stone wrapped in cloth pressed against his chest and a stranger frowning over him. Tamsin was maybe 30, with one blind eye and forearms knotted from work. Her camp was not a hermit's nest but a workshop. Copper coils, glazed jars, graphite sticks, stacks of salvaged gears, and sketches pinned to hide walls. "Drink," she said, shoving bitter broth into his hands. "Then explain why a village boy is trying to mine sky ore during storm season." "Sky ore," Cale rasped. She jerked her chin at the dark vein he'd been striking. "Fulgurite iron takes a lightning mark if you refine it right. Conducts charge better than copper, worse than silver, and better than either at not melting when angry men misuse it." Cale stared. "Can it hold thunder?" Tamsin snorted. "Everything holds thunder for a moment. Question is, can it let go when you choose?" For a long time he didn't answer. Then he told her about Ember Hollow. He expected pity. He got silence. At last Tamsin said, "Revenge is a dull chisel. You swing hard and break your own hand." "I'm not here for revenge." "No." She asked. He met her gaze. "I'm here for change." That made her smile, thin and dangerous. "Good, change is engineering." Years passed in measured sparks. Tamsin taught him the mountain way. Read storms by smell, not sight. Ground rods before clouds break. Never trust dry wood near charged coils. Never grip both terminals unless you enjoy seeing your own skeleton. She taught him metallurgy deeper than any village forge. How to fold ore with charcoal glass. How to coax impurities to slag by timing bellows to color, not clock. How to case harden without brittle core. How to listen for a bad weld through gloves. Most of all, she taught him systems. "Anyone can build a weapon," she said, tapping his temple. "Build a tool and peasants hide it in barns. Build a system and kings lose sleep." Cale built in secret notebooks first. Water wheel dynamos, charge jars, ignition rails, insulated cable sheaths from resin and linen, pressure valves for steam pulse, repeatable fittings any competent smith could copy. When he was 19, he built his first Thunder Lance. It was ugly, copper spine, fulgurite tip, induction coil wrapped in oil-soaked braid, a backpack jar rack that hummed when loaded. He tested it on a dead pine. Blue-white light leapt with a crack like the sky splitting. The trunk exploded into splinters and vaporized sap. Cale laughed once, half terror, half awe. Tamsin cuffed him hard enough to ring his ears. "Never laugh at first success," she snapped. "First success is where arrogance begins." He didn't laugh again. He built better. By 21, he had 3 classes of tools: storm javelins, short-range arc projectors to disable cavalry and metal armor, thunder rails, fixed line conductors buried near roads, triggered from hidden pedal switches, ward boxes, defensive capacitors for villages, grounding lightning safely and powering night lamps, pumps, and alarms. That last one changed everything. Because the first village he helped wasn't his own, Ember Hollow had become nettles and stone, but a riverside hamlet called Dunn's Ferry. Raiders came monthly. The villagers paid, starved, paid again. Cale spent 10 nights installing a ward grid around their granary and bridge. He trained 2 mill girls and a carpenter to maintain it. He left before dawn. When raiders came next, their lead riders hit concealed rails. Saddles flashed, horses bolted. Men dropped screaming, muscles locked by current, blades useless in numb hands. Dunn's Ferry lost no one. Word moved faster than carts. A ghost smith in storm cloak, a man with thunder in glass. A forge son who made peasants dangerous. Some called him Thunderite. Some called him Liar's Tale. Lord Varkle called him treason. By then Captain Dren had risen to Marshal Dren, commander of levy columns across 3 valleys. He heard stories in a warm hall over roast boar and dismissed most. "Peasants gossip when they're hungry," he told his officers. Then 2 tribute trains vanished in 1 month. Not stolen, disabled. Wagons found with iron rims fused to axles. Harness buckles welded shut by heat. Drivers alive but shaking, speaking of light jumping between rain drops and a hooded man who never touched a sword. Dren stopped laughing. He sent patrols with insulated gloves and wooden shaft spears. Cale adapted. He discovered pressure-triggered spark mines worked on boot nails regardless of gloves. He learned to target wagon tongues and wheel hubs rather than armor. Break logistics, not bodies, and armies starve before battles start. Still, each strike tightened the noose. Varkle posted bounties in every market: silver for information, gold for capture, land for his head. Tamsin read one poster in silence, then fed it to the forge. "Time to decide," she said. "Decide what? Whether you're a storm or weather." Cale frowned. "Difference. A storm passes, weather stays." She leaned on the bench, blind eye milky in firelight. "You can burn for one glorious season and die a song, or you can teach others until your enemies face 1,000 blacksmith sons." Cale looked at his hands, scarred, strong, older than he felt. "I choose weather," he said, so they changed strategy. No more lone strikes. They began building a network: hidden workshops in mills, monastery basements, abandoned charcoal pits. Apprentices trained apprentices. Designs were broken into modules so no one captured smith could reveal the whole. Cale wrote manuals in plain language: if coil hum rises above kettle pitch, discharge immediately. Never ground through a body. Use rods. Do not trust nobles bearing treaty wine. Within 2 years, 14 villages had ward boxes. 6 had rail defenses. 3 could build their own charge jars. Tribute collections dropped by half in the North Valleys. Lord Varkle responded as tyrants do when fear replaces certainty. He made an example. He chose Ember Hollow's ruins. On the anniversary of its burning, Varkle's men dragged 30 hostages from neighboring villages, millers, bakers, 2 children, and bound them to posts in the old square. A notice was nailed to Garen's broken anvil, to the one called Thunderite: "Come alone by sunset, or they burn as your village burned." Cale read it with hands so steady they frightened him. Tamsin stood beside him in the ruined forge, wind-moving ash that had lain 6 years. "Trap," she said. "Yes. You can't walk into it." "No," she studied him. "But you will." "Yes." Tamsin exhaled through her nose. "Then don't go alone in the way they expect." Sunset bled copper over Ember Hollow. Marshal Dren waited in the square with 200 soldiers, crossbow lines on rooftops, pikes in rings, and wet hides draped over powder carts to guard against sparks. Lord Varkle sat beneath a canopy, velvet cloak over mail, face pale and bored. The hostages knelt in a row, ropes at their throats tied to one long line. Dren raised his voice. "Thunderite, show yourself." A figure stepped from the old east road in a dark storm cloak, hood low, hands empty. Murmurs rippled. Dren smiled. At last, the figure stopped 20 paces away and threw back the hood. Not Cale. Tamsin Rook, one-eyed and grim. Dren's smile faltered. "Where is he?" "Learning," Tamsin said. A whistle cut the air. From hills north, south, and west, answer whistles rose short, coded near and far. Dren barked, shields up. Archers. The first thunder rail fired. It ran beneath the main road, buried weeks ago where tribute wagons had worn ruts. Currents surged through hidden fulgurite stakes, arcing into the ring of pikes. Men convulsed, dropped weapons, screamed. Crossbows loosed from rooftops, then misfired as rooftop coils, disguised as chimney braces, dumped charge into damp bowstrings and metal prods. From the orchard edge, villagers in leather aprons cranked hand dynamos and fed lines. From the old mill race, water wheels spun beneath camouflage boards, charging ward banks. This was no duel. This was infrastructure. Dren roared orders, trying to reform lines. "Advance, take the woman." He charged himself with a dozen guards. Tamsin stood her ground until they were 10 paces out, then stamped a petal plate hidden under ash. The ground before her exploded in blue forks. 3 guards dropped. Dren stumbled, armor smoking, one arm locked from spasm. He ripped off his gauntlet with his teeth and kept coming, eyes wild. A second whistle shrilled, different code. All at once the hostage rope snapped loose. Not cut. Released by a buried latch system triggered from the old well. Children ran as concealed villagers surged from cellar pits and dragged captives behind stone walls. Varkle stood, finally afraid. "Kill them all," he screamed. Then thunder answered him. Cale rose from behind Garen's broken forge wall, wearing a harness of ceramic insulated plates and a coil rig across his back like folded wings. In his hands was no sword, only a long fulgurite staff humming with gathered charge. Every eye in the square turned. Dren pointed, half-burned, spitting. "There, shoot him!" Bolts flew. Cale slammed the staff butt to ground. A fan shield sparked, an iron curtain snapping bolts off course, some shattering, some spinning harmlessly into mud. He walked forward through rain that had begun as a mist and now thickened, each drop turning the square into a web. His voice carried, not shouted, but cut clear. Lay down weapons and live. Some soldiers did. Varkle drew a jeweled pistol, rare southern make, powder fired and aimed at a fleeing hostage boy. Cale moved before thought. The staff cracked once. A white arc leapt the distance and smashed the pistol in Varkle's hand into molten fragments. The lord shrieked and fell, clutching a burned wrist. Dren, roaring rage, rushed Cale with a spear. Cale sidestepped and drove the staff against Dren's breastplate. Charge dumped through mail and wet leather. Dren locked rigid, eyes wide in disbelief, then collapsed face first in the mud. Silence hit hard. Rain hissed on embers. Cale stood over the fallen marshal and looked to the ring of soldiers, many kneeling, many dropping blades. "No more tribute," he said. No one answered. He lifted his staff and pointed to Varkle writhing beneath canopy cloth. "Your lord burned villages for memory," Cale said. "Remember this instead." From the hills, dozens of ward beacons ignited in sequence, blue lamps rising one after another across the valley like a constellation brought to earth. Village lights, not palace fires. The soldiers stared. For the first time in generations, they saw who held the grid. Varkle's rule did not end that night, not fully. Power never collapses in one dramatic breath. It fractures, bargains, metastasizes, retreats. But tribute caravans stopped in the North Valleys within the month. 3 barons declared neutrality when their own levies refused to march into electrified passes. 2 city guilds secretly purchased ward designs to protect warehouses from accidental fires, then discovered peasants paid better for tools than nobles did for terror. Varkle tried to rally a larger campaign. His quartermasters found axles fused, powder ruined by damp sabotage, bridges grounded with hidden rods, and smiths across his lands quietly out of suitable iron. He died 2 winters later of fever, raving at lightning no one else saw. No songs were written for him. Cale did not become king. He had no taste for thrones. He became something harder to kill, a teacher. He and Tamsin founded the Free Forge Compact in an old abbey where bells once called only monks. Now they called smiths, millers, potters, coopers, scribes, and stubborn farm girls with steady hands. They taught metallurgy next to literacy, wiring next to rights, grain storage next to governance. Every ward box installed came with a town charter clause. No tribute may be extracted without elected consent and open ledger. Any attempt to burn granaries voids all prior claims of lordship. Some nobles signed and adapted. Some resisted and were outlasted. Children who once hid from riders now learned to repair line breaks after storms. Villages shared excess current to pump irrigation uphill. Night schools opened under blue lamps. Winter deaths dropped. Grain yields rose. Thunder became ordinary. That was the point. Years later, when Cale returned to Ember Hollow for the first time without armor, the nettles had given way to stone paths. A new forge stood where Garen's old one had burned, bigger, with double bellows and insulated bus lines running to a lamp post in the square. At the center, Garen's cracked anvil remained, mounted on oak and polished smooth by touch. Cale placed his palms on it again. This time he did not whisper the names of the dead as a wound. He spoke them as foundation. A little boy nearby watched him with blunt curiosity. "Mister," he asked, "is it true you carry thunder in a stick?" Cale looked down and smiled. "Sometimes." The boy squinted at the ward lamp glowing above. "Can I learn?" Cale glanced toward the forge, where a woman with burned, scarred hands was showing 2 apprentices how to temper edge tools by color. One of them was a girl no older than 12 arguing confidently about coil spacing. He nodded. "You already started." The boy grinned and ran off. Rain clouds gathered over the stormback teeth, low and heavy, grumbling across the valley. People looked up, judged distance, and kept working. Some checked lines, some closed shutters. No one panicked. Weather, not storm. Tamsin joined Cale at the anvil, older now, gray at the temples, blind eye bright as moonstone. "You still brood too much," she said. He huffed a laugh. "You still hit students with tongs, only the promising ones." They stood in companionable silence as first drops fell, ticking on slate and steel. Across the square, a bronze plaque caught the lamp glow. It read, "Ember Hollow Common Forge founded in ash, rebuilt in stormlight, no tribute without consent, no hunger by decree." Below that, carved smaller, almost as an afterthought, "Remember who owns tomorrow." Cale traced the words once, then turned toward the forge doors where apprentices were waiting, impatient, loud, alive. He had come home with thunder. He stayed to build light.